And then you have also the Indigenous American situation. And you will, with the Indigenous Americans, I think you'll find also a lot of different groupings. The generation that Hakeem and I are from is probably it's a lot different. We became Muslim over 20 years ago. And the people that are becoming Muslim now are actually very different in what they're looking for and in what their orientations are than ours were, for instance. So I think that within the indigenous community, you have a very large segment of African American. But this is also breaking down because there are now a new generation of children in this country that aren't necessarily black, they're not necessarily white, they're not necessarily Hispanic. You have a lot of children of the 70s, the 60s and the 70s, and so you're getting a lot of a mixture. You know, it's not as black and white in this country as it used to be. There really is a diverse, and you're all seeing it because you're in these schools, so you're seeing this new phenomenon. And so there's a lot of people coming out of that background that are coming into Islam. The Tiger Woods phenomenon, right? I mean, where do you place him, right? Because he's not African American, he's not Asian American, he's not white American. So it's this new phenomenon. So you have that aspect, and within the African American community, I think you have, and Dr. Nyang's much more versed than I am in this, but my own experience is you do have different groups. You have within the African American community people that are coming out of black nationalist type movements that are very politicized in their outlook and approach. And then you have people also that have come out of the Nation of Islam, children of the people of the Nation of Islam. And you'll see many, many names even in the popular culture, like Tupac Shakur, right? Who has, you know, he was had Muslims in his background. He has a Muslim name. You'll see many of these popular artists now coming up with a Muslim name. Now, some of that is just a cultural phenomenon of taking Islamic names, but there are many of them whose fathers were Muslims in the Nation of Islam or had come into the Warithuddin Muhammad's group, things like that. So you have that grouping. And then you have many African Americans who are more within the mainstream Sunni tradition. And so you have a lot of groups that are really trying to discover, trying to get beyond the kind of the black nationalist approach and really trying to see what is this teaching about, and kind of rediscovering Islam for themselves. And that's a very promising development, I think, in the country. And then within the white American community, the Caucasian American, you'll also get diverse groupings, but oftentimes the white Americans tend to be more attracted to Sufism and come in oftentimes through Sufism. Many, many white Americans have come in to Islam through the books of Idris Shah. Many of them have come through kind of groups like Dr. Nyang was talking about, the Sufi, what he called the popcorn Sufi groups, that get into Islam through that and then start reading and you know, somebody will get interested in Rumi and they'll hear these sayings, my heart is a temple for the Hindu and the synagogue for a Jew and the church for the priest and a mosque for the Muslim, and think that in a sense Sufism is this kind of universalist teaching. But then as they get more rooted in the tradition, they start discovering that Rumi was a practicing Muslim his whole life, that he prayed 5 times a day. And so they begin to see that, there is a place for this thing called Sharia, or sacred law. So for many, many white Americans, the law is a kind of almost alien thing. And in a sense, I think a lot of Americans do have somewhat of an aversion towards a law-based tradition, especially when you're coming out of a tradition that, in some ways is love-based, or in some ways is certainly focuses much less on the law and more on the spirit. And so you have that element within the community. But